It's quite peculiar to consider, isn't it, that the very nations now intent on wiping each other off the map were once the closest of companions, truly inseparable friends. Yes, we are indeed discussing Iran and Israel. This wasn't just some ordinary friendship. In fact, the leaders of both nations would meet in secret, exchanging gifts with one another, and they would also sign confidential agreements. Their bond was so strong, it was often held up as an example for others. There are many things we could discuss, but the most astonishing fact is that the very nuclear program now being criticized was actually a gift to Iran from Israel and America themselves. But how exactly did this come about? At what point in history did the friendship between Iran and Israel truly begin? Which nations or groups were envious of this close bond? How was it that weapons were procured from Israel even during the Ayatollah's rule? And what was the ultimate turning point when this once deep friendship transformed into bitter enmity?
Viewers, to truly understand the deep roots of this friendship, we need to go back in time a little, to a period when the entire Middle East region appeared entirely different. Initially, this entire region was under the rule of the mighty Ottoman Empire, an empire that eventually came to an end in 1922, right after the conclusion of World War I. At this juncture, the British Empire had firmly established its dominion here, and the powerful movement of Arab nationalism was steadily gaining momentum. The Arabs had just recently gained their freedom from the Ottoman Empire, and they were eager to establish their own independent nation.
In fact, a significant reason for the Ottoman Empire's defeat in World War I was that the Arabs had secretly collaborated with the British forces on the explicit promise that after achieving independence, they would be allowed to form their own distinct country. However, in the region, besides the British and the Arabs, there remained one significant power that had considerable issues with Arab nationalism, and that was Iran. At that time, Iran was a powerful nation, and its people generally considered Arabs to be of a lesser status. The Shah of Iran believed that if all the Arab countries were to unite, they could indeed become a serious threat to Iran. For one, Iran's dominant position in the Persian Gulf would become divided because the Arab nations had already started to call it the Arabian Gulf rather than the Persian Gulf. And secondly, Iran's population was predominantly Shia Muslim, while the Arab populations were largely Sunni Muslim. Even though both of them are Muslims, if we look at history, there has always been a silent competition between these two over who will truly represent Islam. The Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, harbored a deep fear that the burgeoning influence of Sunni Muslims might extend its reach into Iran, ultimately leading to the usurpation of his royal throne. But who could have possibly foreseen that Iran, feeling increasingly isolated in the Middle East, was on the verge of gaining a powerful and unexpected ally? Then came the year 1948, that historic year when, following the United Nations Declaration, the Jewish state of Israel was established. As soon as Israel was formed, neighboring Arab nations perceived this as an injustice to the Palestinians, leading them to attack Israel. This war, while posing a grave threat to the very existence of Israel, also became a path for the Shah of Iran to rid himself of the Arabs. In reality, Iran's primary concern wasn't so much with the state of Israel itself, but rather with the increasing influence of the Arab nations. This meant that while Arab countries were actively engaged in conflict with Israel over the rights of Palestinians, Iran's sympathies and alignment were clearly with Israel. Conversely, Israel itself began to perceive the necessity of cultivating non-Arab allies amidst its predominantly hostile regional neighbors. It was precisely because of this situation that Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, developed a strategic policy, which is commonly referred to as the peripheral doctrine. They argued that since Israel is a very small state, completely surrounded by Arab countries on all four sides, we must forge friendships with the neighbors of our adversaries. And on this particular map, the largest and most strategically important neighbor of the Arab nations was Iran. This very Israeli policy was what laid the initial foundation for a strong friendship between Iran and Israel. The very first and indeed the most significant consequence of Ben-Gurion's policy came to light in the year 1950. Following Turkey, Iran stood as the second nation with a Muslim majority population that officially granted de facto recognition to the State of Israel. Through the diplomatic channels of the Swiss government, Iran dispatched a formal letter to Israel, not merely extending its acceptance of their existence, but also proactively putting forward an offer of genuine friendship. This was not an official de jure recognition, but rather a clandestine agreement that everyone was well aware of, essentially what you might call an open secret. The world generally believed that Iran did not acknowledge Israel, but in actual fact, the Shah of Iran permitted Israel's diplomatic mission to be established in Tehran. In Tehran, a considerably large Israeli office was established, which functioned precisely as an embassy would. Yet, on its exterior, no Israeli flag was visible, nor was a designation embassy ever inscribed. People knew it was Israel's mission, but officially it was referred to as an Israeli trade office, or sometimes something else. Before we delve into how much and on what occasions Iran and Israel supported each other, let's first understand why the Shah of Iran, despite leading a Muslim nation, chose to support Israel. There were three significant reasons behind this situation. Firstly, the Shah aimed to consolidate his monarchy's power and transform Iran into a modern, powerful, industrialized nation. For this, he urgently needed advanced technology and specialized expertise, which Israel was uniquely positioned to provide. Secondly, the Shah of Iran harbored a deep fear of Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was actively championing the cause of Arab nationalism. The Shah perceived that Iran could potentially become his next target. This apprehension compelled him to align himself with Israel. However, the most significant underlying reason was the Shah of Iran's extremely close relationship with the United States. In 1953, Iran's Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh made an effort to diminish the Shah's powers. However, the United States, specifically through the CIA, intervened to assist the Shah and ultimately preserved his rule. Following this incident, the Shah felt a profound sense of gratitude towards the United States and was unwilling to disregard any of their wishes. America also wanted Iran and Israel to remain close friends with each other. The Shah was so afraid of his own people that he even formed a secret police force, which he named Savak. This police force's job was to apprehend or eliminate those who spoke against the Shah. And you might be surprised to learn that Israel tasked Mossad agents to train Savak. Mossad trained Savak on how to monitor people and how to conduct interrogations. Intelligence sharing between Savak and Mossad was a routine practice. These two agencies would consistently collaborate to target both communism and various Arab militant groups. Furthermore, it wasn't just intelligence. Iranian Air Force pilots would also receive their training in Israel. Israel provided Iran with advanced weaponry and cutting-edge technology, something the entire Arab world at that specific time could not even possibly conceive. Furthermore, both nations actively collaborated on the development of missile technology, and they also formally entered into agreements for extensive research concerning the intricate technology of nuclear weapons. That Iranian nuclear program, which America and Israel are so intensely pursuing today, was actually initiated with their own assistance. Back in 1957, the then American President Dwight D. Eisenhower inaugurated a major campaign that he famously titled Atoms for Peace. The fundamental purpose of this ambitious program was to extend nuclear technology to America's allies throughout the world, specifically so they could produce cost-effective and abundant electricity. As a notable example, the United States provided Iran with its very first nuclear research reactor in the year 1967, a facility which was then established within the premises of Tehran University. The interesting fact is that back then, Israel itself provided training to Iran's nuclear scientists, who are now being systematically assassinated. The friendship between Iran and Israel wasn't solely reliant on a military alliance. Rather, their economic ties formed the strongest pillar of that relationship. Israel was in dire need of oil, and the Arab nations had imposed a strict boycott, refusing to supply them with any. Iran, which at that time was a close ally of Israel, possessed abundant oil reserves. However, there was simply no viable route available to transport that oil all the way to Israel. If oil containers were to attempt to reach Israel by passing through the Persian Gulf, then the Red Sea and subsequently the Suez Canal, the issue was that the Suez Canal was under the control of Egypt, a nation that stood firmly with the Arabs, and Egypt would under no circumstances permit such passage. If we consider the land route between Iran and Israel, Iraq, Syria and Jordan are situated. And these are all Arab countries. This means there was absolutely no way left to transport oil from Iran to Israel. However, to truly honor this friendship, a dedicated pipeline was constructed. You can observe that Israel possesses a port situated on the Gulf of Aqaba, which is known as Eilat. From this very point, the pipeline would commence its journey, extending all the way to Israel's Ashkelon port. This entire undertaking was officially designated as the Eilat-Ashkelon Pipeline Project. This action was taken specifically so that Iranian oil tankers would be able to depart from Karg Island and make their way into the Red Sea, from which point they could then bypass the Suez Canal to reach the Gulf of Aqaba and then proceed to unload their cargo at Israel's port Eilat. Through this secret pipeline, Israel was able to secure its oil supply, while at the same time, Iran also gained a significant opportunity to sell its oil to Europe, given that Israel's Ashkelon port is conveniently located on the Mediterranean Sea, which means oil can reach European markets without any major hindrance or obstacle like the Suez Canal. This was not merely a pipeline, it represented a significant bond of brotherhood between Iran and Israel. Its ownership was equally divided, with a 50% stake held by Iran and the remaining 50% by Israel. Together, they pooled their financial resources and invested them strategically to challenge the dominant oil monopoly of the Arab states. This friendship was so incredibly strong and steadfast that the meetings between the Shah of Iran and the Israeli Prime Minister Ben Gurion were always conducted in utmost secrecy. Whenever Ben Gurion would arrive and disembark at Tehran's airport, he would invariably be wearing a wig, specifically to avoid detection and slip past the watchful eyes of the media. In the 1970s, the trade mission between Tehran and Israel, which was actually an embassy, was completely active. Israeli engineers, doctors, and military advisors were always present there. Israel taught Iranian farmers modern irrigation techniques and advanced technology. Direct flights also operated between the two nations. This era is widely regarded as the golden age of friendship between these two countries. It was during this very period that the Shah of Iran hosted the world's most extravagant and largest birthday celebration. On October 26, 1971, it marked the Shah's 52nd birthday and the 2500th year anniversary of the Persian Empire. For this elaborate celebration, an entire mini-city was specially built within the desert. A special runway was also constructed, on which over $100 million was spent during that era. Kings, queens, presidents, and prime ministers from all over the world were invited for this grand occasion. Food was specially ordered from Paris's famous Maxim's restaurant and brought in via private jets. The Israeli Prime Minister was not extended an invitation to this specific party, a strategic move to ensure that the developing friendship between them would remain entirely confidential. Although Israeli leaders were not physically present on the stage, Israel's clandestine intelligence agency Mossad collaborated closely with the Shah's personal security team. Together, they meticulously devised the entire protection plan for this grand event, specifically to avert any potential attack or incident. Despite the Israeli Prime Minister not receiving an invitation to the party, it made absolutely no difference to the strong bond of friendship they shared. For the next several years, this close relationship continued on in exactly the same manner. But eventually, the inevitable day arrived when the deep friendship between Iran and Israel transformed completely into bitter enmity. During the 1979 revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini successfully overthrew the Shah of Iran, fundamentally transforming the nation into an Islamic republic. Immediately upon his arrival and assumption of power, Khomeini publicly declared that Israel was an undeniable enemy of Islam, and he branded the Shah as nothing less than a traitor. Just a few weeks later, a significant attack was launched against Israel's trade mission, and in the symbolic gesture, the Palestinian flag was prominently raised there. On the same day, Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat arrived in Tehran, and Khomeini announced that this was no longer the Israeli, but Palestine's embassy. This was the moment when the story of Iran-Israel friendship did end. But for now, it wasn't buried. After the Islamic Revolution, the story takes an interesting turn. A year later, when the war between Iran and Iraq broke out, at that crucial time, Iran found itself in desperate need of weapons, and then, once again, necessity brought these two together. At this critical juncture, Israel extended its assistance to Iran, clandestinely providing them with a steady supply of weapons. This protracted conflict under Khomeini's leadership persisted for a full 8 years, with armaments continuously arriving from Israel. Israel's primary strategic advantage in this situation was to significantly weaken its neighboring Arab state, Iraq, by consistently providing military supplies to Iran. After the Islamic Revolution, Iran abolished many of the old Shah's establishments, including the infamous Savak secret police, its oil pipelines, and the Israeli trade mission. However, one crucial project that Israel and America had initially gifted to Iran, Khomeini chose to reactivate, and that was Iran's nuclear weapons program. In 1990, when the Iran-Iraq war finally came to an end, Israel began to realize that the primary threat was no longer Iraq, but instead Iran's nuclear weapons program, which had now fallen under the complete control of the Islamic revolutionaries. From that time, a shadow war started between them, and over it, wars continue to this day. And this was the point where Iran and Israel's friendship was completely buried. We hope you'll all like and share. Thank you so much for your loving comments. See you in the next truly fantastic video.